Hi guys, thanks for watching the review video. I think this will help you a lot with your test when you get there. First, we're going to start by reviewing Romanticism and kind of talk about what that is and give an example. So first of all, Romanticism, if you remember, is an artistic, literary, and intellectual movement. It started and ran through the second half of the 18th century. It did a couple things. It revolted against the social and political norms of the time. And then it also was a reaction against scientific rationalization of nature, and putting it into numbers and forms and things like that. It did stress instead strong emotion, stress the experience of nature for yourself, the awe that one can experience in nature, and even the horror of it, thinking about what nature could do and how powerful it really is. All right, and here's the poem, When I Heard the Learned Astronomer by Walt Whitman. We've definitely talked about this one before. I divided it up just so you could see a little bit easier between the top half and the bottom half. The top part concentrates on what would be the norms of the day as far as scientific information, the proofs, the figures, the columns, charts, adding and dividing and measuring, and all of that when we're learning about stars, which are a part of nature. On the other hand, the author takes the last few lines, and instead of sitting there and listening to the astronomer any longer, he gets tired of it. He gets up, he goes gliding and wandering off in a mystical night, and he himself is able to look up at the stars in perfect silence. And now he's happy. Okay, so moving on with our test review. This is over Romanticism, Transcendentalist movement, and civil disobedience, which is what we've been working on the last couple of weeks. We already did Romanticism in the first part of the video, so Transcendentalism, you probably noticed, is very similar, and it also has some overlapping writers and people who are involved in that one also. So basically, it's a pretty simple idea. It's that all people, men and women included, have knowledge about themselves and the world that kind of transcends or goes beyond what you can actually see or hear or, anything, any of your senses. You can kind of overcome things that seem to be obstacles in front of you. And this knowledge that people have comes through intuition and imagination, and it's not really through any logical means or the actual senses. So the basic idea is that people can trust themselves to be their own authority on what is right. And that sounds very similar if you looked at the civil disobedience quotations and you joined into the discussion with your classmates. If you didn't do that, make sure you do that. Transcendentalists, their basic beliefs were individualism and self-reliance. They took a stand for women's rights, which is why I had you guys go in and look up a specific woman that you wanted to from the time period. Abolition, of course, reform of many things, including the government and education. They did criticize the government and organized religion and certain laws and social institutions, and even a little bit industrialization. They created an American state of mind in which imagination was better than reason, creativity better than theory, and action was better than contemplation. So the basic thing here, you can take away, is that doing something, being creative and doing something and being in action is better than sitting around thinking about things. And they did have faith that all would be well, because basically humans can transcend whatever limits might look like they're in front of them and be successful and reach astonishing heights. So there you go. They're a pretty positive group of people. All right. I did have you read this poem, and I only asked you one question about it. It happens to be called Water by Ralph Waldo Emerson. And I asked you, the water understands, about personification, and most of you got that correct. The water understands is being, or the water is being given a human characteristic. But if you read the rest of the poem, the water understands civilization well. And without reading the whole thing, if you look at the questions on the right-hand side of the screen, what if water in this poem symbolizes all of nature? So nature is pretty powerful. It can destroy things. Water destroys things little by little, and sometimes not so little by little. Wind destroys things. Different parts of nature can kind of come out of nowhere and change the world and change the face of the earth and what things look like. So what Ralph Waldo Emerson was saying is, if we don't use it correctly, or if we don't appreciate it like we should, then what's going to happen? Well, it'll still be there. It will still be very elegant, but it will destroy things. And so, we're looking at nature, like I said earlier in the video, with some kind of awe and a little bit of horror at what nature can actually do, if you let it. All right. Civil Disobedience was a rather lengthy essay by a man named Henry David Thoreau. And he basically contended that a person could and should be trusted by his government to think for himself and understand what is actually right. He's the one that was saying that if a law is unjust or unfair, that any reasonable person would be willing to break that law in order to do what is right. And I know a lot of you made comments on those quotes in the discussion, and those were great. Go back and read some of your classmates' posts and respond to them. And I will get to you with more information on the test shortly.